You have seen the movies. A lone samurai, katana gleaming, settles everything in a single perfect cut. But the chronicles suggest something messier. Victors often wrote these records to justify their lords. The deadliest warriors were not always the ones with the most elegant swordplay. They were the ones who understood that killing is a system. Technical skill, battlefield impact, and psychological terror work together. Today, we are looking at 6 samurai you have never heard of. Their lethality came from specific choices about weapons and methods. There is a pattern in those choices that quietly unravels the katana myth. You will likely spot it by the 3rd example. If you want to see whose version of history won and what they buried to win it, subscribe. 2 swordsmen meet on a dueling ground. One holds live steel, the other carries only a wooden bokken. Only one walks away completely unharmed. This is how the Ito-ryu sword school remembers Ito Itosai. He was a late Sengoku duelist who treated killing as a technical problem to solve. His signature technique was kiriotoshi, a single motion that parries and strikes simultaneously. It eliminates wasted movement. The chronicles of the Ito-ryu school credit him with 33 undefeated duels with live steel. His most famous victory came against his own successor, Mikogami Tenzin. Itosei used a wooden sword against Tenzin's live blade. He struck with such precision that he disarmed the man without drawing blood. Itosai's record comes from his students. 33 is a suspiciously round number. Generations likely polished this stat for posterity. Think of it like an undefeated boxing record from a bygone era. It was curated to build legitimacy. What matters is what it tells us about martial lineages. If Musashi wrote the philosophy of killing, Itosai was the lab technician who reduced it to mechanics. But notice his primary teaching tool. It was a wooden sword, not the katana his school would later romanticize. The next samurai did not bother with precision. He made even his allies call him a demon. The Shincho Koki describes a general returning from battle drenched in blood. The chronicles say he was red from head to toe. This was Mori Nagayoshi, Oda Nobunaga's frontline berserker. His weapon was the Ningen Mukotsu spear. The characters engraved on the tang read, "Human, boneless." The name claimed the blade pierced so cleanly it felt like passing through empty air. Notice the weapon again. It was a cross-shaped spear, not a sword. In a single engagement, sources credit him with beheading 27 soldiers. Nobunaga's own scribes recorded this number. They were paid to make the Oda forces look unstoppable. Whether Nagayoshi killed exactly 27 or just many does not matter. The record itself served a purpose. Nagayoshi weaponized terror. He once executed a gatekeeper for simply asking him to dismount his horse. That story spread. In a warrior culture built on reputation, unpredictable violence made Nagayoshi a legend. The chronicles do not just describe what he did, they describe how other samurai talked about him. That is the difference between killing and creating a killing reputation. The spear gave him reach. The stories gave him psychological leverage before he ever entered a room. So far, we have wooden swords for teaching and spears for killing. The next man turns battlefield violence into something bureaucratic. At Sekigahara, one warrior faced a logistics problem. He had killed so many enemies he could not carry all the heads. Kani Saizo was a frontline spearman fighting for Tokugawa's forces. He was credited with 17 heads during the post-battle inspection. This number is more credible than most. Saizo could not manage 17 trophies while fighting, so he invented a solution. He stuffed bamboo leaves into the mouths of corpses to mark them as his property. When Tokugawa Ieyasu conducted the formal head inspection, Saizo's kills were distinguishable from scavengers. Ieyasu nicknamed him Bamboo Saizo after witnessing this method. This was optimization under battlefield conditions. In Sengoku warfare, head-taking served as proof of service for land grants. Saizo understood the incentive system. He invented inventory management for corpses. He represents the spear-wielding infantry who decided most battles. His lethality was administrative. He killed efficiently and documented it for the bureaucracy. 3 example in, you have noticed the lack of katanas. But some of the deadliest samurai did not even need to be on the battlefield. They killed by deciding who had to die. Most commanders try to preserve their troops. Shimazu Yoshihiro designed tactics where death was the primary calculation. As a commander in Kyushu, Yoshihiro earned the nickname Devil Shimazu. His signature tactic was Sutagamari. These were suicide rear guard units of matchlock gunners. They would fire one volley, then charge with swords until killed. This was done simply to slow pursuing enemies. The Shimazu clan records present this as standard doctrine taught to officers. At Sekigahara in 1600, the Western army collapsed. Yoshihiro did not retreat. He carved a path through the enemy center and left high-ranking casualties in his wake. The Shimazu records describe this breakout as a calculated maneuver. They emphasized the planning behind this suicide charge to justify why their lord survived while his men died. It transformed abandonment into strategy. Yoshihiro weaponized loyalty. He budgeted his soldiers like ammunition. This was lethality at an organizational scale. Sacrifice became doctrine. One daimyo rose to power at reconciliation banquets that his guests never left. Ukita Naoye ruled Bizen, and his lethality was political. He mastered killing at the dinner table. He poisoned tea or ordered mid-meal stabbings at peace talks. Regional chronicles depict him as a man with a heart of cold stone. He even assassinated his own father-in-law to consolidate power. Contemporaries learned to dread invitations from Ukita more than battlefield orders. Families who survived him often wrote these chronicles. They needed to explain why they eventually turned against him. Heart of cold stone is character assassination that justifies rebellion. But the pattern of poisonings is corroborated across multiple sources. The fear was real. His weapon was administrative power and access to the kitchen. No sword was required. This breaks the Bushido mythology. His reputation for treachery was as effective as any army. It made opponents hesitate, giving him leverage without drawing a blade. Dead rivals do not form alliances. The Tokugawa, Jiki, and the Yagyu family records claim that 7 elite enemy samurai breached the shogun's command center in 1615. They claim one man cut them all down. Yagyu Munenori. Independent accounts confirm a breach and confirm Munenori fought several men. But saying 7 elite samurai alone is a narrative trope. Both sources are pro-Tokugawa texts. They were written to make the shogunate's protectors look superhuman. The number 7 is symbolic in Japanese tradition. What matters is that the shogunate needed people to believe in this power. Munenori's real contribution was institutional. He was the head of the Yagyu sword school and the shogunate's intelligence network. He developed Setsun Into, the death-dealing sword philosophy. This doctrine argued that killing one evil person could save thousands. It gave the regime a moral language for political elimination. He transformed personal sword skill into statecraft. Munenori decided who lived and died with paperwork and philosophical justification. The Tokugawa Jiki records his role as the architect of systemic elimination. His school taught when and why the state should kill. He gave the shogunate a framework for removing threats legally. When violence becomes policy, the state itself becomes the weapon. So what do these 6 tell us about samurai lethality? We have the duelist, the berserker, the head counter, the suicide tactician, the poisoner, and the state executioner. Now look at what they used. Wooden training swords, spears, matchlocks, poison, administrative assassination, bureaucratic doctrine. The katana is almost absent from the sources when they describe how these men killed. It appears in Munenori's philosophy, but even there it is a metaphor. Why do we remember the katana? The Tokugawa period followed with 250 years of peace. That era needed a symbol. Swords became status objects and art pieces. They became the subject of romanticized writings by samurai who never saw war. The chronicles were written in that peaceful era. They gave us the katana myth because it was safer than the truth. Power actually worked through spears, guns, poison, and paperwork. Which of these 6 caught you off guard? Comment below. Subscribe to see what else disappears when peacetime samurai write about wartime killing. The real story is always more complicated than the legend.